Clara Bennett had always felt like her life was small. She worked as a waitress at the Silver Spur, the only saloon in the little frontier town of Red Rock. Every morning, she would wake before the sun, pull on her worn apron, and head to the saloon to begin another long day of serving drinks, cleaning tables, and smiling at strangers. She moved quickly, her hands steady as she carried plates of food and mugs of ale, but inside, she often wondered if there was more to life than the dust-filled streets and the constant clatter of boots on wooden floors. The town itself was a collection of wooden buildings, dusty streets, and the occasional tumbleweed rolling past. Miners came and went, their faces grimy from the mines. Cowboys swaggered in, tired from long rides across the plains. Merchants shouted from their shops, trying to sell what little they had to travelers passing through. For Clara, it was just another day. She knew most people only saw her as the saloon girl, someone who poured drinks and smiled politely. But those who took the time to notice her saw something different: her gentle heart, her quiet courage, and her readiness to help anyone in need. Clara had a habit of looking out for others even when it caused her trouble. She often gave extra food to children who came in hungry, even if it meant she would go without. She would help anyone who was hurt or tired, offering a kind word or a bandage when she could. She didn't do it for praise or recognition. She did it because it felt right. That kindness, small though it was, made her life feel meaningful, even if her surroundings seemed unchanging. One late afternoon, as the sun painted the sky orange and red, Clara was wiping down the bar when the saloon doors swung open with a loud creak. A man stepped inside, leaning heavily on his horsewhip. His coat was dusty, his boots caked with mud, and a deep cut ran along his forearm. The room quieted for a moment. The cowboys playing cards glanced up but returned to their game quickly. The miners at the back barely noticed. But Clara did. She walked over, her apron flapping softly as she moved. "You're hurt," she said gently, noticing the blood staining his sleeve. "Sit here. Let me take a look at it." The man looked at her, surprised by her concern. I'll be fine," he said, his voice rough from the road. Clara shook her head. "No, you need help." She guided him to a small corner table and grabbed a clean cloth from behind the bar. "It won't take long. I promise." The man hesitated, then allowed her to clean his wound. He flinched a little, but Clara's steady hands and calm voice reassured him. She tore a piece of cloth from her apron, carefully wrapping it around the cut. "There, that should stop the bleeding. You need to rest," she said, placing a warm cup of tea in front of him. He looked at her, almost in disbelief. You don't even know me," he said quietly. Clara smiled softly. "That doesn't matter. Everyone deserves a little help sometimes." The man introduced himself as Jack Lawson, a drifter traveling through towns, working odd jobs wherever he could. He spoke quietly about his journey, about the trouble he had encountered along the way, and about how he had narrowly escaped a fight with a gang of men who wanted more than he could give. Clara listened, her heart opening with each word. She didn't interrupt. She just nodded and offered words of comfort when she could. Over the next few days, Jack continued to visit the saloon, sometimes bringing small gifts of thanks. A loaf of bread, a fresh apple, a story from the road. Clara would laugh at his tales, sometimes rolling her eyes at his exaggerations, but always appreciating the effort. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. Jack admired Clara's kindness and intelligence, and Clara found herself drawn to his courage and honesty. Life in Red Rock moved slowly, but something about Jack's presence made the days feel lighter for Clara. She began to imagine a life outside the saloon, a life where her kindness could touch more than just the few people who wandered in for a drink. Yet she also knew that danger followed Jack wherever he went, and she worried for his safety. Still, she could not ignore the feeling in her chest that life was beginning to shift, that her days of quiet routine might soon lead to something extraordinary. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the dusty streets, Clara cleaned tables while Jack sat in the corner, quietly observing. A group of cowboys came in, rowdy and loud, but they noticed Jack immediately. He tensed, remembering past encounters. Clara saw it and moved closer. "Stay calm," she whispered. "Don't make trouble and they'll leave you be." Her voice carried more authority than she realized. Jack looked at her, amazed at her courage, and nodded. The cowboys grumbled, took their drinks, and left. Jack exhaled deeply. "How do you do that?" he asked. Clara shrugged. "I've had to deal with difficult people my whole life." I've learned that kindness can be stronger than anger. Jack smiled genuinely this time. He could see that Clara's world, though small, was filled with courage, and that courage inspired him in ways he hadn't expected. They spoke long into the evening, sharing hopes and dreams. Jack mentioned the possibility of moving to a new town, starting fresh and finding safety from the troubles that always seemed to follow him. Clara listened, her mind alive with the possibilities. As the night grew darker, Clara felt something she had never felt before, a sense of destiny. A single act of kindness, something so simple, had brought a stranger into her life, and that stranger had begun to change everything. She realized that her life, which had seemed ordinary, was on the verge of becoming something remarkable. By the time Jack left for the night, Clara stood at the saloon doors watching him disappear into the shadowed streets. She felt a mix of excitement and fear. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing clearly. Her heart was ready to embrace it. The next morning, she returned to the saloon, expecting the same routine. But things were different. Clara moved with a new energy, her smile brighter, her steps lighter. Townsfolk noticed it, though they didn't understand why. The children she fed seemed to giggle more freely around her, and even the gruff miners gave her a nod of respect. Clara's world, once limited to serving drinks and wiping tables, had begun to expand in ways she could never have imagined. Days turned into weeks, and Jack's visits continued. He shared news of his journey, the people he met, and the challenges he faced. Clara listened, advised, and sometimes scolded him for his recklessness. But she also learned to trust herself in ways she never had before. She realized that even small acts of courage, a smile, a bandage, a warm meal could ripple into great changes. And so in the dusty town of Red Rock, in a small saloon filled with the smell of coffee and sawdust, Clara Bennett discovered that life could surprise you. One moment you were serving drinks to strangers. The next you were part of a story larger than yourself. One simple act of kindness, a gesture of warmth to a weary cowboy, had opened the door to a destiny she had only dreamed of. As the sun set on the town, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Clara looked out the saloon window. She knew that her life was about to change forever, and deep inside she felt ready for whatever came next. The days after Jack's last visit were quiet, but Clara felt a new energy inside her. Something had shifted in her heart, something that made the dusty streets of Red Rock feel alive with possibility. She continued her work at the saloon, but every task, cleaning tables, serving drinks, pouring coffee, felt different. It wasn't just routine anymore. Each movement seemed to carry a sense of purpose. She could no longer imagine herself as merely a waitress. Then, one afternoon, Jack returned, but this time his expression was serious. He had news, important news, that would change both of their lives. Clara noticed immediately the tension in his posture, the way he avoided the curious glances of townsfolk. She set down a fresh cup of tea in front of him and waited for him to speak. "I need to leave town soon," Jack said quietly. "There's a chance to make things right, to settle some problems I've had with the men who have been following me. It's dangerous, Clara. I don't want to go alone." Clara's heart skipped a beat. She had known this moment might come, but hearing it spoken aloud made the decision real. She could stay in Red Rock in the safety of her small world, or she could step into uncertainty and adventure. Her hand shook slightly, but she met Jack's eyes with steady courage. "I'll come with you," she said. Jack blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" "It's not safe. I don't want to put you in danger." "I'm sure," Clara said firmly. "I've helped people before. I can help you. Besides, I'm ready to see the world beyond this town." And so they planned. Jack explained the situation. A small gang had been causing trouble for him, taking what little he had earned and threatening his journey back to his family. There was a chance to confront them and put an end to the fear he carried. It would be risky, but with careful planning and courage it could be done. The following morning, Clara packed what little she owned into a small satchel. Her heart raced with excitement and nerves. She had never traveled far from Red Rock, never faced danger outside the saloon's walls. Yet the thought of helping Jack, of stepping into a life of action and courage, filled her with determination. The journey was long and difficult. Clara struggled at first, her body unused to riding for hours under the hot sun and the cold nights. Dust filled her lungs and her hands ached from holding the reins, but she refused to give up. Jack noticed her persistence and admired her strength. "You're tougher than I thought," he said one evening, as they made camp under a sky full of stars. Clara smiled, wiping the sweat from her brow. "I've had to be tough," she said. "Life doesn't give anyone everything they want. You have to make your own way." Their nights were filled with conversations and stories. Clara learned about Jack's childhood, his struggles, and his hopes for the future. In turn, she shared her own dreams, a life where she was free, where she could make a difference in people's lives. The bond between them grew stronger with every mile they traveled together, but danger was never far behind. One afternoon, as they crossed a narrow canyon, shadows moved along the cliffs. Clara's heart pounded when she realized it was the gang. Jack whispered for her to stay low, and they dismounted their horses, hiding behind large rocks. The men passed by unaware of their presence, and Clara felt a mixture of fear and relief. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. Finally, they reached the town where the gang had been operating. Jack had a plan, and Clara was determined to follow it carefully. They moved quietly, observing the gang from a distance. Clara's intelligence and quick thinking helped them navigate tricky situations, avoiding traps and finding safe paths. She discovered that her calmness under pressure and her ability to notice small details were just as important as courage. The confrontation came one evening when the gang returned to their hideout. Clara and Jack waited until they were inside before making their move. With careful planning, they managed to retrieve the stolen goods and send a message to the gang that Jack would no longer be their target. Clara's heart raced the entire time, but she stood firm beside Jack, never wavering. When the danger passed, they finally allowed themselves a moment to breathe. Jack looked at Clara, awe and gratitude shining in his eyes. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said. Clara smiled softly. "We did it together," she replied. She realized that the experience had changed her. She was no longer just a saloon waitress. She was brave, resourceful, and strong in ways she hadn't known. Her world had expanded far beyond Red Rock, and she felt alive in a way she never had before. The journey back home was different. Clara noticed the beauty of the open plains, the way the sunlight shimmered on the rivers, and the quiet dignity of the towns they passed. Everything felt new, and she saw possibilities everywhere. She was no longer a passive observer in life. She was a participant, shaping her own destiny. When they finally returned to Red Rock, the town seemed smaller in comparison to the adventures they had faced. But Clara was different. She walked through the streets with her head held high, earning the respect of those who had once overlooked her. The townsfolk noticed her courage and determination. Children looked up to her, and even the gruff miners and cowboys nodded with a newfound respect. Clara decided to use her experiences to help others. She continued to work at the saloon, but now she also helped people in ways she hadn't before, guiding travelers, offering advice to those in trouble, and helping anyone who needed courage. She had learned that even one act of kindness, when followed by courage, could ripple outward and change many lives. Jack remained a part of her life, a companion in both adventure and quiet moments. They shared stories of what they had faced, and Clara realized that life was not about avoiding danger or struggle, but about facing it with kindness and courage. She discovered that true strength came from helping others and trusting oneself. Over time, Clara's reputation grew. People came to the Silver Spur not just for drinks and food, but to meet the woman who had faced danger, helped a cowboy in need, and emerged stronger for it. She inspired others, showing them that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things if they acted with heart and bravery. One evening, as Clara watched the sunset over Red Rock, she thought about how far she had come. A simple act of kindness, tending to a wounded cowboy, had set her life on a new path. She smiled, knowing that her journey was only beginning. The world was full of possibilities, and Clara was ready to embrace them all. She had learned that destiny was not something that happened by chance. It was shaped by the choices one made, by the courage to step forward, and by the kindness offered to others. Clara Bennett, once just a saloon waitress, had discovered the extraordinary within herself. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, she felt a quiet confidence that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with strength, heart, and determination.